learning. And I understand that everybody is pretty much starting school this week and things are going very well. And I think people are really excited to be back. So before we get started today, I'm going to start with something that I do a lot when I'm working with kids and that I do a lot when I'm even working with adults. And before we begin, I really like to check in. And this actually comes from my friends at Frenzy in the United States who do this kind of work every single day too. And this one's for adults. So while you're checking in and while you're getting settled, what I want you to do is I want you to take a look at the screen and I want you to look at box A. And there's some words in box A that describe different kinds of feelings. So happy, proud, joyful, things like that. Box B has things like shocked, nervous, surprised, excited. See some different words: lonely, sad, depressed, hopeless. And then D also has some different kinds of words as well: devastated, extreme, out of control. And I want you to say to yourself, okay, which box do I feel most like today? How am I feeling right now? So A, B, C, or D. And if you could just take a quick second and in the chat, tell us how you're feeling. Helen and I would really like to know before we do introductions and before we get started. So please just take a look at those boxes, choose one, A, B, C, or D, and share with us in the chat. And Helen's going to be monitoring that for me, and we're going to take a look at it. So you might say, Julie, well, why are you having me do this, Dr. Vogel? What is the deal with this? Well, you're taking care of kids and you are working really, really hard, and this creates a space for you to engage in conversation with each other on how you're feeling. Maybe it's for my leaders in the room who want to check in on their teachers, or maybe it's my teachers who just need to check in on each other. And this particular one from Frenzy is for older kids. There are different Frenzy feelings before I begin check-in things that are for younger kids. And it's one of the free resources, and you'll see it at the end. You can just take a QR code picture of it and you can download it if it's something you're interested in for your kids in your classroom. Now, I've also been in several UAE schools and seen many different kinds of things already in place. Use those. Those are really beneficial. Anything that we can do to help understand our kind of self-awareness and our emotional vocabulary will transfer over to how we interact with the kids that we serve. So use it often. Check in with your students, check in with each other as faculty and leadership during this time of uncertainty and change. And welcome back to school. All right, so are we ready to begin our webinar today? Was anyone brave enough to put their letters in the chat? I've got a
Lots
couple
of people,
people.
Julie, lots of people put in there. Thankfully, we've lots of A's,
Oh, yay,
um,
that's a good
a
start.
few B's, and some people being really honest with their feelings. So thank you very much for sharing so openly. Because, you know, Sophia in particular was talking about her frustrations at working at home and just want to be back with the kids. And so we totally sympathize with that. I'm very fortunate that yesterday our kids started back in school, and I can tell you that's why I put that time a day, because it was just such a joy, and you will get there too. Let's hope that is soon. But lots of A's, thankfully.
Good. I am happy to hear that we have lots of A's. Makes me happy too, because times are uncertain. So let's get started, and I'm going to keep us moving today. So the title of our webinar is Supporting Wellbeing in Times of Uncertainty, Caring for Educators While Helping Students Cope. And I would like to take just a minute for Helen and I to introduce ourselves. I'm Dr. Julie Vogel. I work with Renaissance, and I am a national education officer and a psychologist by trade. Have spent most of my career trying to figure out how people learn and what we can do to support teachers, children, and leaders to make this whole education thing really a valuable and cohesive experience for kids. I'm a mom too. One of the things I'm most proud of, I got three great kids that are all adults. And I put this picture up on here instead of the one you see right now because I like that picture better. It's before all of the early gray hair started to come in. So I'm going to turn it over to Helen to have her introduce herself today, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, similarly, my picture's a couple of years old too, but hopefully it's still a resemblance there. So I'm Helen Hamilton, and I'm a teacher by trade, but also have a lot of experience with psychology. My undergraduate and postgraduate in that. And I've used that to great effect, hopefully, within my teaching. And I was a teacher, if you can't already tell, from Northern Ireland. I love to use both UK and Ireland. Thankfully, I'm glad to be part of for 16 years before I took the leap to decide to go elsewhere and experience something different with international teaching. So I actually went to teach in Beijing first for a couple of years and then settled here in the UAE. So I've been here in Dubai for the past 7 years. I've had many different roles, usually related to the pastoral side of school, pastoral lead, designated safeguarding lead. And in my particular school at the minute, my role is primary wellbeing lead and inclusion specialist. So I very much enjoy working directly with the kids in small groups, one to one, and have been supporting them through this time. I'm a mum of two girls, more importantly, and even more importantly, mum of a 5-month-old pup. So we are currently regressing into, I have a 15-year-old and a 14-year-old, so I thought I was past the baby stage, but it's full on at the minute. I went through a you only live once phase in this time of online learning and decided we would give a little one a home. So yeah, thank you, Julie.
Oh my gosh, a puppy. Okay, you're braver than I am. Let's just say that for fact now. So, today, for our agenda, it's going to be very quick and short. We know that you're super excited to be back with kids. You've got a lot of things going on. We want to give you as much support as we possibly can in the least amount of time possible. So today, we're just going to do a little bit of a level set. Just because of my nature, I like to know you to know where things come from and why you might be feeling the way you are. We're going to talk about supporting each other, supporting our students, and then we have a plethora of resources that we're going to share to you with you, because what works for one person might not work for another. And these are resources that Helen and I both agree are valuable for helping during times of uncertainty. So I'm going to go ahead and start. And I'm going to start with a little bit of this level set, some research and some terminology, because sometimes the terminology itself scares people a little bit. And so I want you to know that we've got many definitions of what is going on right now. And right now I have up here the dictionary definition from APA psychology of what trauma is. And you said, Julie, why start with trauma? Because trauma is really just any kind of intense disruption of normal functioning and challenges a person's view of the world as safe, just, and predictable. So trauma kind of gets a bad name because everybody thinks that it can be something really, really horrible. And sometimes it's just pure uncertainty, and it can result from all kinds of different things. And if you think about it, it can result from human behavior. Things happen in life. Human beings cause things to happen, and things happen to us. So, for example, there's war. There could be industrial accidents. I think of things like Chernobyl and how that was definitely a major trauma, but there can be smaller trauma events in our lives. Sometimes trauma comes from natural events, earthquakes and floods, and where I used to live, hurricanes were quite prevalent. And that, I will tell you, that natural event definitely was trauma because it did disrupt normal functioning for weeks and months at a time. It could even be a serious physical injury. My oldest brother was living with us and he had an accident and he became quadriplegic. So that kind of serious physical injury can also be trauma. So any of these things can, cause the word trauma to show up. And I don't want trauma to have a bad name. Because trauma, happens all the time in various degrees and various levels. And there is nothing great about it, but it's also a normal feeling to have that feeling of, oh, wow, my life is disrupted. I don't quite know what to do here. So even from research, trauma is an important human characteristic that happens to all of us at some point. What it does in our brain, just only one brain slide, even though I'm a cognitive psychologist, I'm holding back today, is that it ignites our amygdala and it tells us something isn't right. And you all know what this does. Have you ever heard of fight or flight? This is what the amygdala does. It's constantly scanning the environment. It's trying to make sure that everything is safe, that everything is normal. But if it sees or feels or hears something that is not, it's going to react. And so we have fight, flight, and sometimes we even freeze. Now, freeze doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it does, and it can happen in any situation. I'm terrified of dogs. I freeze, you know? So even though Helen has this beautiful puppy, I would probably be a little reticent when I come back to Dubai again to maybe meet or greet him and would need her help getting through that because it releases all those stress hormones and I freeze. So watch for this in your kids. You might see signs of fight or flight or freeze occasionally for no apparent reason even. So be aware that that can happen too. And trauma sometimes leads to grief. And we always associate grief, or often associate, not always, but we often associate grief with kind of the death of a loved one. But when I was looking for the best way to describe grief, I came across this definition from the Cleveland Medical Clinic. And I highlighted the part that I think is important. Grief can accompany any event at all that disrupts or challenges our sense of normalcy or for ourselves. This includes the loss of connections that define us, right? And the things that are really, really important to us. And it's really important to think about that because what you guys may be experiencing right now, and you may not feel it right at this moment, but you probably were last week or even a month ago when things started to get crazy, is that, oh no, my life here in the UAE is changing. I'm not sure how I feel about that. It's a traumatic event. And now I'm grieving because I'm not sure that things are going to go back to the way they were. And that uncertainty can be very unsettling and cause us to have feelings of grief. That is normal. And they do accompany traumatic experiences. And here's the most of these things will go away with time. Most of these symptoms will abate. Those feelings of, my normalcy and my uncertainty will get better, and things normally start to abate over time. So I just want you to kind of understand the changes in our brain and what happens and how that can affect us from a big picture view. It's not going to help you work with your kids and it's not going to help you feel better, but that's why we have those check-ins, we give our emotional regulation, and we talk to each other every single day. So I want you to think about this new term that I saw, and I love this one. And I wanted to share it with you because this is a major event, and you are experiencing a major event in the UAE and lots of people in the Middle East, not just you, but lots of people. So they call this collective grief, and that is the whole group of you are had a major event. It changed what you count as normal life, and school thrives on routine and regularity and things being the same. That was disrupted. You had to conduct school from home to the very best that you could, but now you're coming back. So things hopefully will start to get better and feel like you're having a normal life. But this is called collective grief, and you're all experiencing collective grief. The shared experiences that we've lost as we struggle to try and figure out a new changed future. How are things going to be different now that we're back in school? What are the things that have changed because of this traumatic event, and how are we going to deal with it? And this was a great quote from one of our Renaissance folks who's also a parent of children in the UAE. And she said, "It's the uncertainty that's the real issue." She said, "Our rhythm has changed and we don't know when it's going to change again." And that is very, very unsettling, right? And so right now you're probably experiencing the high because coming back to school is a sign of normalcy again. It's a sign of hopefully things returning to normal, but we're not quite sure what those outcomes will be. So we're going to help you and share with you multiple resources so that you can deal with that uncertainty, not only so you can help kids, but also so you can help yourselves and that you can all get through this together, because I do believe we all do better when we're working together. So just a couple more things about a trauma approach and the things I want you to think of. There is no one right way to do things. It is why we have so many different resources for you at the end of this and so many different options for you. Yes, some things might be better than others, but just know there is no one right way to do anything. There are always options, there are always choices, and we want you to find the things that work best for you. And Helen has some amazing practical tips coming your way very shortly. So, one of the things that helps when you are working with this kind of trauma environment is to have a sense of safety. So, making sure that your schools, your physical setting is safe and the interpersonal interactions between each other further promote that sense of safety. So, keep that at top of mind. We want to keep that feeling of safety as we work through things and our kids come back to school. The next thing that I want you to think about is trustworthiness and transparency. And you might say, this seems like obvious things. Well, it is until you're in the situation, and then sometimes those are harder to come by. And this is for my leadership. As transparent as you can possibly be makes it easier for everyone to build trust with you. And we all know that. That's not new, but especially in times of uncertainty, this ability to be transparent, providing as much information as you can when you can, is very helpful for people. So, number three, peer support. Lean on each other, lean on the resources that are available at your schools. I was really impressed when I was in Dubai in February with the incredible amount of collegiality I saw among all of the teachers in the building, but also just this whole sense of focus on well-being and taking care of each other and checking in on one another, all the way down to kids in the primary grades and the little ones. All evidence in every classroom I went into of this idea of supporting one another and making sure that we're all doing well. The next one, collaboration and mutuality, which is a really difficult word to say, by the way. And that is trying to make decisions together, and trying to harness that power of we're all in it together. I'm going to hear you out. It highlights the role that everyone in an organization plays in providing care for one another. So, collaborating together, sharing with each other, talking about decisions before those decisions are implemented is really super helpful for these kinds of situations. And empowerment and choice, key for teachers because you're dealing with children. And so you're going to need to be empowered to recognize that you know those children in your classroom better than anyone else right now. And building and on their strengths and their experiences will really help the time of uncertainty abate quicker and kids to get back to normal sooner. So keep that in mind. And pay attention to your culture and historical context. There are things that work better in different places. You know your context in the UAE better than I do. I have some great things. Some of them may work for you, some of them they may not. That's why we have Helen here. She's in your schools, she's with the UAE, she understands the culture and knows what will work well and what may not work well. So lean on those things and those approaches for people. Because teacher well-being, as we all know, is the key to providing quality, equitable education and improving the classroom climate for all students so children and youth are better able to learn. So you're heading back in. Teacher well-being for leadership is probably a high priority. And I hope teacher well-being and self-care is a high priority for every single teacher on our in our webinar today, because we do want you to take care of yourselves. All right, so some things to look for. And this is called compassion fatigue. And teachers are very compassionate people. School leaders are very compassionate people. We love to help children. We love to help children learn. We love to help children grow. We want them to become great people. And there are some signs and some things that we can look out for, A, in each other as peers, and B, for our leadership, some things to look for if some of your teachers are suffering from what we call compassion fatigue. So I'm going to start at the very top there. So, and we're just going to go around the circle, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I do want you to think about and look for these signs in your teachers as leaders, and teachers look for that in each other and make sure you can support each other if you can. So, compassion fatigue happens during these traumatic events, and teachers can sometimes feel a reduced sense of efficacy at work, right? It just isn't the same as it was before. I'm not feeling so great about it. I'm having some issues with that. So you'll notice that in the way they talk about their job, in the way they may interact with each other. So keep that in mind. Concentration and focus problems, very common, right? A very common reaction to trauma and stress. So try and look for that in each other. Help each other out if you see it. Chat with one another. Leadership, provide resources and support for teachers who you see with this. Isolation and withdrawal. Sometimes when the times get tough, some of us will, that's our version of flight, maybe, is to isolate and withdraw a little bit. And so recognizing that each other, pulling us back into conversations and making sure someone's not eating alone in their classroom every single day, those kinds of things. There might be an over sense of exhaustion too. You might notice that, wow, somebody just says, man, I'm so tired all the time. I don't know what's wrong with me. Well, that could be a sign of compassion fatigue. We're so busy taking care of each other, we forget to take care of ourselves. And as teachers, it's really important that you do everything in your power to stay as well as you possibly can so that you can help your kids and recognize the exhaustion and get help and support for that. Sometimes, every once in a while, we can be a little bit jaded, bitter, and pessimistic. Maybe because of that uncertainty, maybe because of that change. And we liked things the way they were before. Why did they have to change? Not happy about it. And you can become a little bit jaded, bitter, and pessimistic at times. Nothing maybe over the top serious, but something to be aware of. And then the next one, apathy and emotional numbness. I tend to get this way during traumatic events in my life because it's easier for me to check out. And so to be apathetic, I have that problem. I happen to have very caring, supportive people around me who force me back into life and do not allow me to have that emotional numbness and just talk about and share my feelings often. So leadership, these are some signs to look for in your teachers because they're very compassionate people and they may suffer from compassion fatigue. Leaders, these are some things you'll see in your own peer group too. Look out for each other, take care of each other. The next one says, well, who's going to be most affected for this compassion fatigue problem that you're talking about? And I want to tell you, you know who really struggles the most often? It's being new to the field of education, right? You don't have that same skill set that someone who's been teaching for 10 years may have or 20 years. And so if you're brand new to the field, you're trying to figure out the job, you're trying to figure out what to do. Things are uncertain because your life has been disrupted. Now it's coming back to normal. Wow, right? So my new teachers are struggling with, or anyone who's been teaching for 5 years or less is going, I consider to be a new teacher, and they're really going to struggle with some of these things. So look out for your new teachers, check in on them more often. If you have a history of personal trauma or burnout, that can be, that's a risk factor for compassion fatigue. Okay, working long hours and or having large workloads. I'm sure none of us have ever experienced that, especially in the teaching field, right? That happens on a daily basis to us. But right now, it's even going to be more heightened and you're going to be more aware of it. So check yourself. You don't need to stay at work every day until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening and try and get up the next day and support kids. And you are fortunate in the UAE. And many of your schools have very good support systems in place. And I can't wait for Helen to share all of her ideas for that, because that is one of the things I love the most, is this sense that everything that you do matters. And you matter because what you're doing is so important. So I love that there are systems and things set up, but that doesn't mean every single teacher feels like they have an adequate support system. So keeping those lines of communication open, chatting with each other, always checking in is probably going to make the biggest difference for you. Let's see. And then let's start here. So, and I believe this may be Helen's section, right, Helen?
I think it is indeed. I think this is me, Julie. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Um, just to say, a lot of what I'm going to say will go in parallel with what Julie has said, and that's important because we're on the same ideas. And I also wanted to say to you all, across the Middle East region, I'm very aware that in a lot of ways this is very uncharted territory. So, like you, we've been finding our way. We've just been finding the things that work for us. So, obviously, I'm at Angila International School in Dubai, but I appreciate that right across the region, everybody is just trying to find what works, whether that be online or coming back in person and to give as much support as they can. So, here's some ideas and some things that have worked particularly in our school, and I hope this helps. But I don't have all the answers. I'm equally willing to hear some of your answers too. In fact, I would love that. So for me, one of the key things, especially when we came back into school on Monday and when we went online, was that we recognized that teachers cannot give what they don't have. Educators in general, leaders can't do that. So as Julie said, everybody needs to be looking after their own well-being and checking in with other people so that everyone feels supported, because we cannot support the little ones or the bigger little ones in our lives if we do not feel supported ourselves. And I think one thing, especially with leadership, that admins can really put an effort into, Julie mentioned this, is helping your staff to be well informed, giving clarity. There's been lots of different information, and sometimes trying to decipher that has been very challenging for everybody. Rumors or fragmented information. Um, our leadership really helped to filter information for us and give us exactly what we needed to do our jobs correctly. So, for leadership, that is the thing you need to do. Make sure your staff are getting consistent messages from you. And then that also helps them to give those consistent messages to staff. And the second one there, so our leadership teams and well-being teams, like myself, obviously I have a team in primary and then we have a team in secondary as well. The key thing for us has to be to not only identify needs with the students, but also with the staff. And that is so that across all levels of leadership, people are keeping an eye, people are talking with each other so that we can identify anything that is of concern or where people need support and really make sure we jump in before anything is left to accumulate and actually can support those members of staff and then help them to do their job. So it's really, temperature checks, just making sure that in departments, in year groups, in phases, that people are just aware of everyone around them. As Julie said, your peers, checking in with them. Um, Key thing is the next point, supporting individual circumstances, because everyone hasn't experienced this in the same way. I come from Northern Ireland, and throughout my youth, troubles, conflict was a regular occurrence. It was something I grew up with. So I probably experienced it very differently to somebody who this is completely fresh for, totally new. Um, they were probably much more anxious than me. Although similarly, perhaps it brought out a little bit of post-traumatic stress with me, and I needed to keep an eye on that. So recognizing that, in your staff, there will be everybody will experience it differently, and everybody will find that uncertainty a different challenge. And do you know what? There will be many of like our families in our school who have family members directly in conflict zones. So it is important to be mindful of them I mean, we've been very careful with regard to flexibility where needed. Our leadership were great at providing us with the opportunity to work from different countries if that was needed. We weren't made to come back to school, and that was really, or to the UAE, because that was really appreciated by our staff, because it allowed people with a different emotional bandwidth to experience it in different places, maybe with their families at home, wherever home might be. That's just what they needed. And then that allowed them to be the good teachers the children needed. Um, adjustments to roles is always a good thing. If somebody's not able to manage a role that they would normally take on, maybe that's a time for somebody else to step in and support. And yeah, taking a realistic approach is really important. Holding expectations, because we all have a duty of care to the students who we teach, but equally we're humans and we need to be humane with each other, because that stability is maintained through flexibility, not rigidity. And we find that works quite well. So prioritizing what you need to do, accepting, that capacity will change, all of those things. And do you know what? A lot of when you're online, you just have to accept that it won't be the same. It won't be as good, but things can be good enough as well, given the circumstances. Lots of open conversations, really important. When things are contained, and people stay in silence, that's where the danger areas are. So normalizing dialogue about well-being and how we're feeling. We do tend to do that. Are you? Oh, yeah, I'm fine. And actually, I've been really conscious. Oh, actually, I'm feeling quite anxious at the minute, so that I'm modeling it for other people as well as the students. And definitely peer support within international teaching or wherever you may teach. Your colleagues are really important. And I mentioned this to Julie. Actually, my first part of anxiety relating to this came when actually school stopped for the early holiday that we had. I was like, oh, even though I have a family, husband, 2 girls, I still felt, oh, my other family were not actually connecting as much. So it felt a little bit of a challenge, but coming back together has really made that more special. Managing teacher anxiety, absolutely. I should have managing adult anxiety in the school, because it's not just relating to teachers, but just making sure that we can help our staff regulate effectively so that they're not carrying things by themselves. They cannot support with student well-being if they don't feel that themselves. And it is important that well-being teams, senior leadership, whoever it may be, step in to help with that emotional strain. Because as Julie says, we spend a lot of time looking out for the children and the students in our care. It's important we look after ourselves. So also reinforcing, I said to you at the start, I don't have all the answers, and it's okay for us to say that. That's very human. And I say that frequently with the children. I'm very honest with them and with other teachers. And then celebrating success. Our leadership did a great job of pointing out where people were doing a great job online or have done since we've come back into school, noticing and highlighting those moments where people need appreciation and people need to be recognized. And that has just led to, a feeling of positivity across the school, just recognizing those efforts, not just outcomes. Thanks, Julie. If you could go to the next slide then. So I suppose this was important for me. What mattered most to us is not about having all the answers, but ensuring that every child has at least one consistent adult, one safe connection, and one space where their feelings are recognized and held. And this is both online and since we've come back. So in times of uncertainty, that's often what restores a sense of safety first. Yeah. And that was for us really important that online we were making sure that children were connected with the people that they felt in school that they were normally connected with, to keep this normalcy that Julie talked about earlier, because that was where the safety came in. And since we've come back, you can see that that has really played its part. Thank you, Julie. Just the next slide. So just in relation to student well-being, obviously we're caring for ourselves, but ultimately our job is all about this. And one thing that we have really focused on, and many of you I bet do, and if you haven't, I would urge you to think about this moving forward, do it now or do it in the days and weeks ahead. Really focus on your emotional literacy. So we can't remove uncertainty, but we can help children to understand and express what it does inside them. So a real focus for us in general, but thankfully, particularly this year, has been a new wellbeing curriculum that we've introduced that we wrote bespoke for us. And we have focused on children's recognition of feelings and emotions, and how to deal with them, and not just your I'm sad, I'm happy, really going into depth at different year groups as we go along and talking about comfortable and uncomfortable feelings. We've used lots of age appropriate tools such as story based discussions to help them to understand different emotions within the stories that they read. Feelings check-in, I love that Julie had that first, because in our school every primary student and a lot of secondary in different ways come into school and we immediately check in with their feelings. Then we have a morning meeting that talks about their well-being and how we can connect with each other. So really we kept those things going while we were online, and they've been especially important for us coming back. And really normalizing mixed emotions. It was interesting in the chat when Julie asked you, how are you feeling? Lots of people say, oh, well, I'm actually all four, or I'm A and B, or, it's not usually just one thing. And really we have focused on teachers, teaching assistants, learning support assistants, us as an inclusion and wellbeing staff, senior leadership, all making sure we're noting if children do display some signs of anxiety, keeping predictable routines, making sure that they know we kept predictable routines when we were online, and then they've just slotted back in whenever they've come back. So we kept timetables pretty much the same whenever they were online. Trying to build resilience in the children so that we get away from this, oh, we're unaffected by everything that's going on, more so that we're able to recover, and we're able to recover with support. Connections have been key for us. So, we, rather than abandoning some routines, we've really lent into those actually, because we felt that that continued to keep that connection with teachers and with their peers. So we wanted the children to feel that when the cognitive load was high of everything that was happening emotionally, they could relax, because actually they know the way things work and they know what's going to happen. And again, in promoting that safety. Other things we have a form, for example, where students can refer themselves for wellbeing support should they feel they need it, or indeed teachers can refer children directly. Obviously, we use CPOMs and things like that for our safeguarding. But if it's just more of I've noticed some things happening, then they can reach out. But also for our families, for our parents, because lots of our families have been affected by, the actually looking after their kids at home for a start. And then also the emotional experience that they've been having related to this. Lots of our children are still displaced at the minute, and many of yours will be the same. And some of ours are not coming back for this term. They've temporarily, we're very fortunate as the North Anglia community to have worldwide schools. So some have decided to go to different places because that's what works with their family. So we've been able to support that. And then just really checking in with our vulnerable students, being there for those students who are neurodiverse, and perhaps there are children with previous safeguarding concerns. Um, all of those are children we know about, but also keeping an eye on our quieter children, those who perhaps, just float under the radar, and making sure we're checking in with them. Um, Meeting children where we're at is or where they're at is one of the most important things we do. We don't go in with assumptions that children are ready to talk. Tell me all about it. Offload, we give them time, and we lead with curiosity. How's things going? How are you doing? Um, and oftentimes, well, what I've seen since we've come back actually is, sometimes children have come to me, even the last day and a half, just on I just wanted to drop this off at your room, Miss Hamilton, or could I maybe come in and just get a fidget or whatever? And they're just seeking that connection, and I just let them do what they needed to do. And then I know it'll come out whenever they need to speak to me. I'm not going to push anything with them. We've really helped our parents with advice on how to speak to their children about what's happening, because we were very aware different parents were telling different messages. And ultimately, when you come back to school, then they're going to hear everything from everybody else. So we wanted to be careful to not make sure everybody's telling the exact same message, but so that no children came back and got a massive shock, based on probably different versions of the events that have happened. So yeah, I would use lots of different flexible ways to encourage children to open up as well. Drawing, creative writing. A lot of the times with the boys, particularly, not making sort of face-to-face eye contact, finding a game we can play together side by side, or just walk and talk, around the corridors, how's things going, but so that I'm facing forward, they're facing forward, and they feel less threatened by me checking in. Online, what I find a lot of kids opened up more is if I give them choice and, said, would you like to turn off your camera while you're telling me this? Because they felt less, threatened by that, and it worked. So yeah, just keeping an eye on that behavior at any stage you're at. Because ultimately behavior is communication, especially in this time of global uncertainty, and it's affecting a lot of people. So there's some ideas. I hope I could talk for a lifetime, I think, but I'm going to try to keep quiet. Thank you, Julie.
Oh, Helen, thank you so much. What I appreciate most about Helen is she's dealing with this day in and day out, and you all are. And so her strategies are so practical and so clear. And so even though they sound easy to do, we know that we're all going through the same thing at the same time. And so that anxiety can be a little bit overwhelming. But thank you. And you know, Helen, where were you when my boys were still being raised? Because I have two boys and a girl. And I swear the only time we could have a reasonable conversation was when I was driving and I was not looking at them. Then I got all kinds of information. And I wish I would have even thought to go, hey, you guys want to go for a walk, and just chatted then too and done all these other things. So, you learn something new every day. You pick up new techniques no matter how old they are. And I will say, even though my boys are grown, it's still easier to talk to them when I'm driving. So those techniques do work. As we think about supporting our kids right now, we know, and here's what I know as a cognitive psychologist, learning does not happen in isolation from how students are feeling. So we have to really think about that. When stress and uncertainty and all those kinds of things are high, emotional well-being becomes foundational to everything else. Because if kids do not have that emotional well-being foundation, it's really hard to learn, it's really hard to focus, and engaging in academic work and growth becomes near to impossible. So you may say, "Oh my gosh, why can't we just jump back into it? Why are things slowing down right now?" Because your kids need you to slow down in your classrooms. Your peers need you to slow down and talk to each other. over and over and again, we keep talking about this idea of humanity and being kind to one another and communicating with one another. It is more important than you could possibly know for the value of ensuring that when kids are ready, academic growth can occur again. Give yourself some grace, give your kids some grace, give your family and community grace, and roll with it the best you can. And there are multiple resources that will help you. I'm sure if you needed help from Helen directly, she'd be happy to do that, as would I, to give you any sort of advice and support that we can. But there are some people that we love out there. Frenzy does a great job. There's QR codes, and we'll send you the slides. So you don't have to worry about finding that now. But there are some great free resources for educators, for parents, for teachers to navigate challenging times and uncertainty together. So we do want you to look into those and take advantage of those. These are just some that I happen to know and love. If you think they could work for you, check them out and see what you think. I don't know. I also have some infographics that I added in here. So, some things that you can look for because kids at different ages do not react the same, right? To traumatic events and to grief and to uncertainty. So there's some different just infographics you could download, you can have for free. The links are all going to be in here that will help talk about, okay, what are some of the symptoms and the signs, and then what are some things I can do to help. So those are there as well. There's another one, trauma and loss reminders, things that we can think about to help us work with our kids. And I've got the next few slides, Helen's going to jump in and tell you about some of the amazing online resources that she has found to help support our kids as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to her for
Thank
this.
you, Julie. I mean, look, just what I put together was the places I go to get support, and here is a range of different clinics and providers who obviously are based in the UAE, but it will apply to the whole of the Middle East or the region in general. Um, who have offered lots of wonderful free talks, just like this one, and you could tap into, but they've also got lots of reels that you can follow on how to support students and yourself. So, Balance Clinic, Lighthouse Arabia, Connect Psychology, Insight Psychology, Free Spirit Collective are all places I go to. The Nurture Place is the two previous school counsellors who actually support in our school and help us run nanny courses for our nannies to upskill. And that's not just what they do, but they have lots of great advice. If you go to the next slide, Julie, thank you. Now, good morning, Miss Foster. If you do not follow her, please make sure you do. There is something you can sign up to, but she posts lots of great advice on dealing with behavior and emotions, and we use an awful lot of her resources and training within our school. It is invaluable, so I'd highly recommend. Greenheart Wellbeing is one of our wellbeing counsellors who comes into school and provides training. Great, but always posts something related to teachers. She's a former teacher, and so London primary teacher is a current head teacher within the UAE. Always gives great advice, always gives sensible information based on what we're being told. Louise Inclusion, again, more from the well-being and inclusion perspective, always points directions to free talks and things going on. UHQ is something we would use much more in our upper primary and secondary for check-ins, and again, it's an app that the kids can go on to. But they were offering a free subscription, if I remember correctly. We had it anyway, to anyone in the Middle East, I think. So please go and check it. And Smiling Mind, just lots of good resources on how to look after yourself and therefore look after the children in your life. So for me, that's sometimes the place I get easy access to information. So I thought those might be useful for you too.
Oh, I love it. And they're right there. And so they're taking in the context of where you are and the things that are important to where you're living because your schools are all over the world. You know, you're everywhere and there's different events that happen at different times in different places that will do that. There's one thing we didn't talk much about today because we didn't have enough time. And I just want to remind you that we're all pretty resilient. And human beings by nature have a heck of a lot of resilience, and so do our kids. And I find that when we really support each other as community and really work hard together, that resilience comes back and it's really easy to grab a hold to and run on and keep moving us forward. So keep in mind, we are all resilient. And we need each other in order for that resilience to work. And so we're going to have some time for some questions in a minute, but I wanted to leave you with this quote, and I don't remember the author of it or where it came from. And then we'll have time for questions and we'll be on for a few minutes if anyone has any. And you can put either your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, I think. But we're going to end with this today because we grieve what was, not because it is gone, but because it mattered. And we fear the shape of what comes next. As we move forward, our greatest certainty remains one another. That is how we get through things. We rely on each other, we help each other, we support each other, take advantage of all the resources here. We will send them all out to you, is my understanding, so you will have them. Take what works for you, ignore what doesn't. And keep all the joy, the love, and compassion that you can, because we all need each other. Helen, do you have any closing remarks you would like to make before we take questions? So come off mute and let us
Yeah,
know.
thank you. Just as you said, Julie, look after each other, but be kind to yourself as well, because it is a
Mhm.
lot. And, reach out for support if you need it. And, if you're not back in school yet, I honestly wait till you see the students coming in. It'll all feel, I don't know if that's the correct phrase, worth it, but the online that we put in and the effort that has been put into to making sure that education has continued for children, you've all done an amazing job. And it never does any harm for parents to actually realize what we do, and that we work hard as educators. So but you'll be glad when you see them back in school.
There is nothing quite like a room full of kids, is there? In a school full of children. I used to hate being in there at night when there wasn't anyone around. It was just, I found it to be the lonely place and couldn't wait for kids to show up the next day. So we're going to open it up. If you have any questions or you have any things that we'll try and answer as many as we can. And we will make sure that you get access to all of these resources because we have them for you.